So what went wrong in Season of Discovery and how can we fix it? SOD was the response to our asking for Classic Plus. And of course, Classic Plus was players saying, hey, we want to play the original game with a few enhancements. We want new abilities and quests and maybe new enemies and new raids. And the game's got to retain the original sort of classic feel. And Blizzard, to their credit, responded, and much of it was great. I really like the new rune system. I like the new abilities. The feel of the game hasn't changed too much. There's new raids and mechanics that are fun, and Professions got an uplift. And probably the best thing was the dev communication. I really liked the way that they've been soliciting our feedback, and they gave a good presentation directly with a lot of detail. So why does the game feel stale, like there's absolutely nothing to do? I'll tell you the two biggest problems now, and then I'm going to explain exactly how I'd suggest they be fixed. So number one, unnatural stopping points. Each phase ends at a level that was never intended to act like endgame. And that's creating a reduction in content and ability issues and gear issues. WoW was built over years to be this multi-week or months-long linear leveling experience from 1 to 60 where quests and professions and dungeons help you gear up in order to reach the next level. The entire focus once you're 60 switches over to gear and potentially gold farming and doing dungeons to help with this gear. And the game is set up that way in terms of quests and zones and most of all dungeons, which I think illustrates it best. So let's look at the dungeon structure here in Atlas Loot because it's a nice list of the dungeons. So Classic has 25 dungeons and 7 raids, and that's considering the single instances of Scarlet Monastery and Dire Maul and Blackrock Spire as 4 and 3 and 2 separate dungeons respectively instead of 1 each, which you could argue they are. But at any rate, these 32 dungeons and raids can roughly be divided into separate leveling and endgame content like this. And maybe there's some overlap around the Sunken Temple and BRD dungeons, but I'll call it 17 leveling dungeons and 15 endgame dungeons and raids. So all this content on the bottom is designed as long-term, endgame, repeatable content. Well, when we hit the SOD phase caps, we stopped the game somewhere that was never intended. And our phase 1 endgame content was roughly these 3 dungeons. And maybe people ran Dead Mines a bit, but it was mostly these 3. And oh, by the way, BFD is actually removed from your spammable dungeon content because we took it away to become a raid, and you can actually only do it every 3 days. Phase 2 at level 40 was roughly these 3 dungeons, and people still maybe ran SM Library and tried maybe the first half of Ulda, but this was pretty much it. Phase 3 should have been more Uldaman, but many are not running it, so we're pretty much only in ZF and Mara, because again, another what should be spammable dungeon was removed to be something you can only run once a week. And of course, you can see how out of balance all of that is with the next phase's endgame content, which was designed all along to truly be endgame. So not only is there not enough dungeon content for these artificial phase stopping points, but we've actually taken dungeons away so that they're weekly or periodic raids instead of spammable dungeons, and that's a reduction in content. And on that note, putting caps on professions that didn't exist before at the unnatural stopping points is a reduction in content. Making certain dungeons inaccessible at levels that they used to be accessible because, again, of the unnatural stopping point, that's a reduction in content. And these are things that make the original Classic worse, not better. And that's why I've said, taking things away from the player is actually like Classic minus. It's a reduction in content. It's not Classic plus. From day one, our guiding principle behind all of Classic Plus or Season of Discovery or whatever it's called should have been add content only. Never take it away. In addition to reduction of content, there's other, maybe more minor issues these stopping points create, like ability issues that ruin classes or specs. Using the mage as an example, because I'm familiar, you might know that mages always get the next rank of Fireball 2 levels before the next rank of Frostbolt. So we got Fireball rank 5 at level 24 and Frostbolt rank 5 at level 26. Well, when phase 1 stopped at level 25, Frost was way behind and totally gimped, and I'm sure the same thing happened to other classes. So I'm arguing we shouldn't stop at all, but why on earth would you stop at an in-between level that had no new spells? It was a very odd choice. Another issue related to these unnatural stopping points is gear. Right? Having players pause at 25 or 40 or 50 creates a gear issue where players work very hard at those unnatural stopping points to get the best possible gear for that level. And in many cases, it's newly added or overtuned gear from the new raids, meaning that the next phase is questing. Especially those early levels are just completely trivialized in terms of both leveling speed and then the new quest or dungeon gear that you'd get. And this issue was especially bad for phase 3 because the phase 2 gear in BFD was just so good that virtually all of the gear you'd naturally get between 40 and 50 was worse than that gear. And the very best gear, even in the new level 50 raid Sunken Temple, was only marginally better, if at all, than that previous BFD gear. So there was almost no reason to go for gear in all of Phase 3. So that's problem one, unnatural stopping points. Problem two, no testing. We're completely screwing up entire sections or phases of this game with the unintended consequences related to untested mechanics. You had classes and new abilities that are just way out of balance with other classes. We had the Ashenvale PvP event. We had the STV Blood Moon thing. We had the incursions in Phase 3. These things all do huge damage to the balance of the game and the leveling and the economy before they get fixed with these drastic, maybe sometimes overshooting nerfs and changes, which frankly tend to exacerbate the problem, because then you have some players that had one leveling experience and some that had another. So you absolutely must test your content. There has to be a beta or a PTR so we can catch and improve some of these glaring issues before they ruin the real game. The only argument I've heard for not testing was to preserve somehow the surprise in the discovery of Season of Discovery.
In order to preserve this sense of discovery, we will not be holding a public beta or PTR for Season of Discovery. We want day one of Season of Discovery to feel as fresh and full of surprises as we can. So we're taking a chance here to keep those first few weeks as exciting as possible.
Well, that's just not what we play the game for. 99% of players don't want to have to figure this stuff out. We're not reading quest text and then running out into the world and looking for the objectives. We're virtually all using Questy or Rested XP to be told exactly where to go. We're not trying out the new gear to see how well it works for us. We're searching online for BIS lists that show us exactly what gear to get and where to get it. And 99% of us are certainly not searching the world for these new runes when each new phase comes out. We're refreshing Wowhead and YouTube, waiting to be told where we can go get the runes so we can try them out. The gameplay with the new abilities is the fun, not trying to find it. So we're completely ruining massive sections of the phase because of no testing to preserve some sense of mystery for that 1% that's going to go find it and be first to post it online while the rest of us, look it up 6 hours after launch. And this is just a massive mistake. So the result of these two big issues for Phase 3 at least, the leveling experience for 40 to 50 was completely deleted. Dungeon content has been reduced, our one raid is on a much longer lockout, and gear is almost meaningless, meaning players instantly became bored. They started raid logging or quit altogether, which is frankly what happened to my small guild and circle of friends, and it's just a very disappointing outcome. So how do we fix it and make a sustainable Classic Plus? We've got to remove the unnatural stopping points. Players that play Classic enjoy leveling at their own pace with a seamless leveling experience and enjoy the true level 60 endgame experience. Do not steal dungeons away to make new raids. That's not increasing content, it's decreasing content because we can now only do it periodically on raid lockouts. No more artificially capped professions or dungeon access or abilities. No new gameplay rules that didn't exist before. All of these are reductions in content, and we should only be adding new content to Classic Plus. Maybe we have 2 or 3 brand new Classic feeling level dungeons, completely new, which is where you put shared bosses that have new runes for all classes. Save raids for 60. I'd be fine keeping the original versions of the Classic dungeons like BFD and Nomer and ST at level, but you could even have, Omega versions of those same dungeons that are the raids like have already been created, but retuned for level 60 with added 60 content. Gotta retune the gear so that BIS or near BIS gear for each character is spread amongst all of the endgame dungeons and raids, and hopefully new raids, and maybe professions, so that there's a reason to go into all of these, whether it's pieces of gear for every class, mats for BIS and chants, or consumables. We need reasons to run all of the content at the true level 60 endgame. And then number 2, for the love of God, we've got to test the content. You cannot have something that is such a massive train wreck as incursions, which any small test with a small group of players would have revealed, hey, look, we can run 6 easy delivery quests over and over, get weeks worth of gold and experience in a few hours, and any bit of testing would have prevented that from being in the game, which I hate to say it, but it destroyed the economy, destroyed the leveling ecosystem, and all but ruined an entire phase of the game. So those are my suggestions and a little bit of a rant. If you're at all curious where I'm coming from, here's a video where I talk about what it was like playing WoW in the first weeks and months of 2004 and 2005. And of course, I really appreciate any likes or subs and especially your comments on any of these videos. Thanks all. Take care.